Hello everyone, and welcome back to Crime Whisper. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. I know many of you listen to this to help you fall asleep, and that's perfectly okay. Just get cozy, relax, and let me take you through tonight's story. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? I love hearing from you now. Let's get into the first case. Case 1. The disappearance of Cody Josiah Bigsby. Cody Josiah Bigsby was born on January 12, 2018. Two parents, Dina Abdul Karim and Corey Jamar Bigsby, in Hampton, Virginia. He was the couple's second child and, over the next few years, they welcomed 4 children in total, including a set of twin boys born after Cody. Cody was a sweet little boy with curly black hair, big brown eyes, and dimples that lit up when he smiled. He loved Spider-Man, although Cody's parents never married. They were together until 2019, when the relationship ended. Dina was dealing with serious health challenges, and the couple agreed Corey would take custody of the children. According to Dina, Corey wasn't thrilled about taking Cody at first, reportedly calling him a mama's boy. Still, the handoff happened on November 1st, 2020. Dina met Corey halfway between her new home in Washington, D.C., and his in Hampton, Virginia. That would be the last time Dina saw any of her children. She says that after the handoff, Corey never allowed her to visit and refused to give her his address. For years, she had no physical contact with her children. Then came January 31st, 2022, at 9 a.m. Corey called 911 and reported that 4-year-old Cody was missing. Officers arrived at the Buckrow Point townhomes on Ranelagh Drive just after 9:15. Corey told them he had put Cody to bed around 2 a.m. and noticed he was gone when he woke up that morning. He said he searched the house before calling for help. Police immediately issued a press release with Cody's description: about 3 feet tall, wearing a black bomber jacket, black sweatpants, and Spider-Man flip-flops. The FBI joined the search, and around 50 volunteers combed the area. Many were reminded of another heartbreaking case, the disappearance of 2-year-old Noah Tomlin, who also went missing in Hampton 3 years earlier. Sadly, Noah was later found dead. On February 1st, Hampton Police Chief Mark Talbot announced that both of Cody's parents were considered persons of interest. He explained that inconsistencies had emerged in Corey's statements, though he did not reveal specifics. Investigators focused their search on the Hampton metro area, believing Cody had not left the area. They even began searching local waterways, including the NASA steam plant, a facility that turns waste into energy, and, tragically, the same location where Noah Tomlin's body was found in 2019. This chilling pattern pushed police to treat the case with urgency. On social media, police asked the public questions: do you know Cody or his father Corey? Have you seen them or the siblings since Christmas? Do you live in Buckrow Point and have security cameras? Anyone who answered yes was urged to contact the FBI. Despite both parents being labeled as persons of interest, police didn't suspect abduction. There was no evidence to support it, so no Amber Alert was issued. At the same time, they didn't believe Cody had wandered off either. When asked if he thought Cody was still alive, Chief Talbot said, "We will work as if he's out there waiting for us to find him." At the time, Corey was cooperating with police and undergoing interviews. A local news station even spoke with his sister Tandela Butler. She stood by him firmly, saying, "I know my brother loved his children. He wasn't violent. He never laid hands on them. He would just raise his voice. That's all. I don't believe for 1 second he could hurt his children." But behind the scenes, investigators were digging deeper. By February 3rd, police arrested Corey Bigsby on 7 counts of child neglect charges, unrelated at the time to Cody's disappearance. According to the arrest report, Corey admitted to leaving his children home alone on multiple occasions. On December 13, 2021, he left them, some as young as toddlers, for over 3 hours to buy a car in Norfolk. No babysitter, no way to call for help. He told police that taking the kids with him was too much of a burden. A similar incident occurred on January 25th, just days before Cody went missing. Again, Corey left the children alone for 2 hours while he ran errands. His attorney later clarified that these charges weren't directly tied to Cody's disappearance. He also claimed Corey had not been speaking with police voluntarily, and that his client was denied legal counsel at the beginning. Chief Talbot pushed back on that, saying, "Mr. Bigsby is a capable man who had every opportunity to request a lawyer. If he had, we would have respected that request, but he didn't." OutroGentle.com tone, as of now. Cody Bigsby has not been found. His case remains open, and the investigation continues. If you know anything, no matter how small it might help bring answers to this heartbreaking mystery, please contact Hampton Police or the FBI tip line. Thank you for joining me tonight on Crime Whisper. I hope wherever you are, you feel safe, calm, and held in kindness. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next one. Continuing the case, Corey Bigsby was a 43-year-old Army veteran, a man with a full military career under his belt. He was described as intelligent, capable, and fully aware of his legal rights. According to Chief Talbot, at no point during the initial interactions with investigators did Corey request an attorney. Talbot emphasized, had he asked, we would have honored that request. However, Corey's arrest was not considered the end of the investigation, far from it. Chief Talbot clarified that the arrest allowed police and the FBI to intensify their efforts and dive deeper into the forensic data they had collected. But with each passing day, the hope that Cody was still alive began to fade. By February 5th, nearly a full week after Cody's disappearance, the community remained determined. That cold Saturday morning, dozens of volunteers gathered again to continue the search. They scoured wooded areas near Cody's home, pushing through thickets, mud, and brambles. Some used machetes to cut through dense brush, while others piloted drones and checked nearby water sources and abandoned storage units. Though their efforts showed heart and resilience, they found nothing. The next day, on Sunday night, the community gathered again, this time for a candlelight vigil at the soccer fields near the Buckrow Point apartment complex where Cody had lived. People lit candles, held balloons, sang, and prayed for Cody's safe return. On February 8th, Corey was denied bond. His lawyer said they would be appealing the decision. Meanwhile, a neighbor put up a large, hand-painted sign near the apartment complex. It read in colorful letters, "Cody, come home." That neighbor told reporters that her own children were having a hard time understanding what had happened to Cody. The sign, she said, was meant to bring light and comfort to all the kids in the neighborhood. On February 12th, police responded to a possible break in the case. A blue child's jacket had been found in a field behind the apartment complex. Forensics teams collected the jacket and also noted tire tracks nearby. Still, no conclusive evidence was found, and the hope for a resolution dimmed. Despite the uncertainty, the community continued to pour out love for the missing boy. By Valentine's Day, a local fence near the soccer fields had been transformed into a memorial. A sparkly box invited people to leave Valentine's Day cards for Cody. The fence was adorned with flowers, balloons, and heartfelt messages. A Facebook group dedicated to Cody's case ballooned to tens of thousands of members, with people around the world praying for answers. That same week, Cody's mother, Dina, issued a public statement. She explained that, due to legal advice and the upcoming trial, she would not be speaking in any media interviews. Her words were quiet, but full of gratitude. "I sincerely appreciate all the volunteers, rescue workers, police, FBI, journalists, friends, and everyone in the community, showing support for Cody. Your love truly warms my heart. I'm praying for the safe return of my baby boy. Meanwhile, a non-profit group called Water Team Inc., a volunteer search and rescue units, searched the Norfolk area, near Corey's former residence. They had received calls from residents in the neighborhood who believed the area might be significant, but even after combing through the location, no new evidence was uncovered. Then, a shift in the case. Later in February, Chief Talbot held another press conference. He admitted that investigators had mishandled Corey's initial interviews. Days earlier, Talbot had publicly insisted Corey had never asked for a lawyer, but after a full audit, the truth came out. Here's what actually happened. Corey voluntarily went to the police station after reporting his son missing. Around 10 p.m. that night, he was given a polygraph test that lasted for several hours. By 4 a.m., tensions escalated. Corey got into a heated argument with a detective over the test results. During that argument, Corey did indicate Wise that he wanted legal counsel, but that request was ignored instead. The interview continued, and Corey remained in police custody for another 2.5 days without access to an attorney. Once Talbot was made aware, he launched a full internal review of nearly 100 hours of recorded interactions between Corey and the authorities. The audit confirmed that Corey had been read his Miranda rights at least twice, once during his initial questioning, and again before the polygraph. He waived those rights until he requested legal counsel early in the morning on February 1st. Talbot acknowledged that Corey's request should have been honored, and it wasn't. The lead detective involved in that interview was placed on administrative leave. However, police insisted that statements Corey made before requesting a lawyer remained valid and would be used in court. Talbot also said he didn't believe this misstep would impact the charges already filed against Corey. In July, the case escalated further. Corey was indicted by a grand jury on 30 counts. The charges included 15 counts of felony child neglect for repeatedly leaving his young children home alone, as well as additional charges for alleged child abuse and failure to seek medical care for an injured child. Court documents revealed that Corey had left his children home alone on 7 separate occasions, including on December 13th, 15th, December 28th, January 11th, and again on January 25th and February 1st, the day after Cody vanished. One of the charges accused Corey of committing an act so gross and reckless, it showed a complete disregard for human life. Despite multiple bond requests, Corey remained in jail. If convicted on all counts, he could face up to 162 years in prison. And yet, none of these charges directly explained what happened to Cody Bigsby. That same month, members of Cody's extended family spoke out publicly for the first time. They offered a $25,000 reward for any information about the boy's whereabouts. And they stood firmly behind Corey. One of Corey's uncles claimed the police had effectively kidnapped Corey during his initial detention and accused them of stacking up charges to distract from their own failures. He said, "I thought it was innocent until proven guilty, but with Corey, it's guilty until you prove yourself innocent." Corey's aunt described him as a good man and a devoted father. She said, "He's not the villain they're making him out to be." And like others in the family, she held out hope. "I prayed and asked the Lord," she said, "and he told me Cody is alive." Corey's sister also shared that she waited outside the police station during the entire interview process and said she was never informed that her brother had been detained for days. Outro.com. Compassionate tone to this day. Cody Bigsby remains missing. The investigation is still open. The pain of not knowing continues for his family, the community, and everyone who has followed this heartbreaking case. If you know anything at all, no matter how small, please reach out to Hampton Police or the FBI tip line. Your information could bring answers or peace to a family still waiting. Thank you for joining me tonight on Crime Whisper. I'll be back soon with another case. Until then, stay safe, stay kind, and sleep well. Continuing the case, the disappearance of Cody Bigsby, Following Cody's disappearance, police maintained that Corey Bigsby had not been held against his will. Chief Talbot publicly stated that Corey had been free to leave at any time, but Corey's sister strongly disagreed. She argued that no one could believe Corey was free to go. If he wanted to help find his son, he would have wanted to do that from home, she said, surrounded by the people who love him. She also accused the department of violating Corey's rights, claiming he was denied counsel, held for 4 days, and deprived of basic necessities like food and water. She alleged that investigators were aggressively seeking a false confession. Her concerns went deeper, she said. When a black man in this country goes to report his child missing, it's sad that he has to worry he'll be prosecuted instead of helped. At the time, Corey's other children had been placed into foster care. Family members were unable to contact them. The system, she said, was slowly vetting relatives to take custody, but the process could take months. I believe the Hampton Police Department is trying to cover up their failure to act, she added. Corey's child neglect trial was originally scheduled for November, but was delayed. His legal team requested a mental health evaluation. By January 2023, a full year after Cody went missing, there were still no answers. But the makeshift memorial on the chain-link fence outside Cody's apartment remained decorated with cardboard signs, stuffed animals, and balloons. The community hadn't forgotten him. Hampton Police Chief Mark Talbot said the case still haunted him. In his words, "We became intimately familiar with how Cody lived. We learned about the trauma he endured, the deprivation he experienced in his short life, and it's deeply traumatic." Though many in the community held on to hope, Talbot offered a more somber view. At this point, it's very unlikely that Cody is alive. If he were, there would be some trace. Someone would have seen him, heard from him, maybe captured him on camera. But there's nothing, not a single sign since he disappeared. And a child that age can't survive on their own. Someone would have to be caring for him. But we've never seen evidence of that. Not from the beginning. Still, the investigation pressed on. Talbot said he received weekly briefings and believed that the work being done was leading somewhere important. Despite the lack of progress, volunteers continued to search the area with the same passion they had a year earlier. "We've searched every place we thought might give us answers," Talbot said, "and while I don't think they'll find anything new, I don't believe these volunteers are wasting their time. Their effort matters." Investigators had also followed a tip that led them to an outdoor location in Maryland near Washington, D.C., based on a statement Corey made while incarcerated. But that search yielded no results. The investigation had further challenges. Corey didn't use a traditional cell phone plan, which meant investigators couldn't track his movements through location data. Instead, he used phones that only connected to free Wi-Fi, making it difficult to trace his whereabouts in the days before Cody disappeared. According to one of Cody's aunts, she had spoken to Cody on the phone around Thanksgiving or Christmas of 2020. As far as police could determine, that was the last time anyone other than Corey had seen or heard from the little boy. Neighbors also told investigators they rarely saw the children. Cody and his 3 brothers were almost never outside. They weren't enrolled in school and had no known babysitters. Mental health evaluation and new developments. In March 2023, Corey was transferred to Eastern State Hospital for mental health treatment and restorative services. This followed a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation after conflicting assessments about his competency to stand trial. Corey's family and attorneys claimed that his declining mental health was the result of prolonged incarceration and the trauma of losing his son. His family also maintained their belief that Cody was still alive, but that he may have been trafficked. Corey's sister said, "I believe with all my heart Cody is alive. I think he was trafficked. I believe he'll be returned one day." A clinical psychologist, Dr. William McKenna, evaluated Corey in May 2023 and ultimately determined he was competent to stand trial. Then came the biggest development yet. In June 2023, Corey Bigsby was indicted by a grand jury on new charges: homicide and concealment of a dead body. According to court documents, prosecutors believed Cody died on or around June 18, 2021, full 7 months before he was ever reported missing. What led them to that specific date has not been publicly disclosed. Corey's sister disputed the timeline. She said she clearly remembered a family gathering that took place in September or October 2021, a celebration for their late mother's birthday. According to her, Corey brought all 4 of his children, including Cody, and they played on the trampoline in the backyard. Another family member claimed to have visited Corey's home in December 2021, and that Cody was there, alive and well. But just days after Corey's indictment, something unexpected happened. On June 21st, Corey was granted bond and released from jail. His defense team argued that, since no body had been found and no evidence had been presented to prove a homicide, Corey was entitled to bond. Prosecutor Anton Bell strongly opposed the decision, stating that Corey posed a danger to the community and had a history of going AWOL in the military. Bell believed Corey would continue to hide Cody's body if released. Still, the judge approved bond. Corey was placed under house arrest at his older daughter's home in Norfolk. The bond total reached $80,000, and strict conditions were set: no contact with his younger children, a curfew, and permission to leave only for court or medical appointments, suppression hearing, and a shocking confession. In November 2023, a court hearing was held to determine whether key evidence should be suppressed ahead of trial. The evidence in question: letters of confession Corey allegedly wrote while in jail. One such letter, dated August 3, 2022, was written after Corey reportedly called over a corrections officer in the early morning hours and asked him to document a confession. The officer, emotional on the stand, read the letter aloud in court. It said, "Found my son unresponsive. Tried to give CPR. Could not revive him. Tried several times. I begged God to save him. I decided to walk outside and spoke with God back." The script can continue here in a future part. Outro: gentle and quiet tone as the legal case builds. The heart of this tragedy remains the same. A little boy, gone without a trace. Cody Bigsby's story is one of mystery, heartbreak, and ongoing questions. The search for the truth continues. Thank you for joining me tonight on Crime Whisper. I'll see you again soon with another story. Until then, stay safe, stay thoughtful, and sleep well. Part 3, Confessions, Courtroom Truths, and the trial of Corey Bigsby after Cody's disappearance. The case against his father took a shocking turn while incarcerated. Corey Bigsby handed over a series of confessional letters to corrections officers that prosecutors would later present in court. In one of the first accounts, Corey told a corrections officer that he had found his son unresponsive. He said he tried CPR multiple times, but Cody wasn't coming back. In a panic, he placed Cody's body in a trash bag and left it in his car for 3 days. Eventually, he said he drove to Garrett, a Morgan Boulevard in Maryland, intending to leave Cody in a trash can. But instead, he said he took his son out of the bag and dug a shallow hole beside a tree in the woods. The officer, who transcribed Corey's words, was so distressed by what he heard that he went straight to his supervisor, crying. The supervisor activated her body camera and personally asked Corey to write the confession in his own words. That handwritten letter said, "I, Corey J. Bigsby Sr., confess that on January 30th, 2022, I stepped outside of my apartment to get something out of my car. When I came back, I found my son Cody at the bottom of the stairs, unresponsive. He must have fallen. I tried CPR multiple times. I begged God to bring him back. When he didn't, I panicked. I placed him in a trash bag and put him in the back of my truck. On January 31st, around 3:30 a.m., I took him to Garrett A. Morgan Boulevard and laid him near a tree line. He had tape on his ankles and wrists, a cowboy blanket under him, and Beats headphones on. I left him there. Then, I ate nearby. Another jail officer testified that Corey gave her a note on Christmas Day 2022, repeating the claim that he had buried Cody after finding him unresponsive on January 31st, 22 to a third confession. This one, found in Corey's jail cell notebook, was even more disturbing. It described a violent episode on June 18, 2021, where Corey allegedly struck Cody's head against the floor, hit him with his fists, placed him in the bathtub, then into a refrigerator, before eventually burying him. Corey's defense team argued that these letters should be excluded from trial. His lead attorney, Amina Mapthini Willard, told the court that Corey had been subjected to intense psychological trauma at the hands of law enforcement and jail staff. She claimed the statements were made under emotional duress and should be thrown out, but the judge disagreed after reviewing the circumstances. The court ruled that the letters would be admissible evidence at trial. Trial begins. March 2024, Corey Bigsby's trial began on March 6, 2024. Cody's mother, Dina Abdulkarim, was one of the first witnesses to take the stand. She recounted the last time she saw her little boy, November 2020, when she met Corey at a 7-Eleven, halfway between Hampton and Washington, D.C., to turn over Cody and his siblings. At the time, she was recovering from medical issues and had expected the arrangement to be temporary. But after that exchange, Dina said Corey became distant. She never received his new address. Phone calls, emails, and messages went unanswered. I was ghosted, she said. In early 2021, Dina received a troubling email from Corey, claiming that Cody was inappropriately touching his younger twin brothers, who were barely over a year old. Corey said he was afraid he might hurt Cody and insisted the boy needed psychiatric help. Yet Cody was never returned to his mother. The last image Dina ever received of Cody came on June 14, 2021, the twins' birthday. During the trial, prosecutors showed that photo to Dina. She broke down in tears. "That wasn't my son," she said. "He was always happy, full of joy, but in that photo, he looked scared and sad." Dina testified that she reached out again on January 15, 2022, the day after Cody's 4th birthday. She emailed Corey, asking, "Where are my kids, Corey? Are they even alive?" 2 weeks later, police called to tell her that Cody had been reported missing. The brothers' testimony on the 4th day of the trial. Cody's older brother, now just 7 years old, testified remotely through video, wearing a powder blue bow tie and suspenders. He bravely told the court what he remembered. He said he had found Cody lying on a bed, unresponsive. His eyes were open, his face was red and dry, and there were bruises. The child remembered shaking his little brother, trying to wake him, then running downstairs to ask their father what was wrong. "I was thinking he was dead," he said, tears running down his face. He believed he had been about 4 years old at the time placing Cody's death sometime before Christmas Eve 2021, more than a month before Corey reported him missing. The boy also recalled seeing Cody in a Superman costume one Halloween, though he couldn't be sure what year it was. He was shown photos of himself and Corey at Busch Gardens, and said they were taken after the last time he saw Cody. Police later confirmed through Corey's phone records that those theme park pictures were taken in July 2021, suggesting Cody may have already been gone by then. The most damning evidence throughout the trial, the most powerful pieces of evidence, were Corey's own letters. Correctional officers testified again, explaining how Corey voluntarily gave them notes and emotional, others matters factor describing what happened to Cody. One letter, which sparked a full search operation in Maryland, stated that Corey left Cody's body near a wooded area off Garrett A. Morgan Boulevard. The search involved cadaver dogs, but sadly, turned up nothing. Another handwritten note, passed quietly through the bars of his jail cell on Christmas Day, began, "On January 31st, 2021, I, Bixby, Corey J., attempted to perform CPR on Cody Josiah Bixby, and it didn't work." This marks the end of Part 3. Gentle outro. The trial of Corey Bixby continues. But one thing remains heartbreakingly clear. Cody Josiah Bixby's life ended far too soon. Whether through neglect, anger, or fear, the people who were meant to protect him failed in the most devastating way. As we continue to follow the courtroom proceedings, one hope remains for truth, for justice, and for peace. Thank you for spending time with us tonight on Crime Whisper. We'll see you soon for the next update. Until then, stay safe, hold your loved ones close, and sleep gently. Part 4. Confession or Coercion. The final verdict in the Cody Bixby case. Corey Bixby's confessions didn't end with his first handwritten notes in yet another disturbing letter. Corey claimed that after a failed attempt to revive his son with CPR, he took Cody's body to a building on Garrett A. Morgan Boulevard, building 5511 to be precise. He wrote that he buried his son beside a tree behind that structure, then drove home and prayed to Jesus for forgiveness. The letter closed with a chilling line: "I failed him. I am becoming tired of the torture, so now I am confessing, because my family and the police are conducting these crimes, and I cannot take it anymore. Sincerely, Corey Bixby." After jail medical staff reviewed that letter, Corey was placed under safety watch and relocated to a new cell. During the move, an officer found a composition notebook, black and white, just like the ones in school. Inside were more confessions, though 2 pages had thick black X's scrawled across them, as if someone tried to take the words back. But the pages were still legible, read aloud in court. The letter said that on June 18, 2021, Corey walked into a room, grabbed Cody, and dragged him into the kitchen. There, he struck his son's head against the floor and beat him with his fists. Cody went into cardiac arrest. Corey claimed he tried CPR, then placed Cody in the bathtub, wet him down to see if he'd respond, and prayed. When nothing changed, he laid Cody in a bed, left to get a flashlight and gas, picked up snacks, and later placed Cody's body in a fridge, then a car, then finally in a hole beside a tree behind the same Maryland building. He claimed he went to King's Dominion the next day, burned the clothing he had worn, and later returned to try to burn Cody's remains. That letter ended: "Please accept my confessions. Sincerely, Corey Bixby." Week 2, the 911 call and closing arguments. Week 2 of the trial began with the prosecution playing the 911 call Corey made on January 31st, 2022, the day he reported Cody missing. In the recording, Corey said, "I think my son is missing. We're moving today." He described looking all over the house and mentioned Cody had asked to go outside the night before. When asked how tall his son was or what he was wearing, Corey couldn't answer, only saying his Spider-Man flip-flops were also missing, so he must be wearing them. The defense called several witnesses, including Corey's sister and a man who claimed to have seen Cody just 2 days before Corey reported him missing. They argued Corey's statements were the result of pressure and trauma, not actual confessions. In closing arguments, prosecutor Anton Bell told jurors he beat that child with his fists and dumped him like trash. "You have the ability to give Cody what no one else did." Accountability. Defense attorney Curtis Brown countered, "There's no DNA, no fingerprints, no physical evidence. Not one person saw my client do anything." But Bell had the final word. Cody's eyes were open when his brother found him. The last thing he ever saw was his father beating him. Verdict and aftermath on March 12, 2024. The jury took just over 2 hours to reach a verdict. Corey Bixby was found guilty of second-degree murder and concealment of a dead body. The following day, Hampton Police Chief Jimmy Weidman, who had taken over after Mark Talbot stepped down, spoke publicly. Even with a conviction, our work isn't done. The search for Cody continues. We will not stop until we bring him home. Despite the verdict, Corey still insisted he was innocent. From inside Western Tidewater Regional Jail, he gave an exclusive interview. He said the letters were fabricated under pressure, that guards had coerced him, denied him basic needs, and forced him to write things through the intercom. They kept telling me, write a confession letter, and I said, there's nothing to confess to. But they told me what to write, and eventually, I wrote it. He claimed he had never harmed his son, and that the emotional testimony of his surviving children had been manipulated. But on June 18, 2024, exactly 3 years after the alleged date of Cody's death, Corey Bigsby was sentenced to 45 years in prison, 40 years for second-degree homicide, the maximum sentence under Virginia law, plus 5 years for concealing a body. He still faces an additional 162 years for pending child neglect charges. In the courtroom, Cody's mother Dina spoke powerfully through tears. I have to live with the fact that I put my kids in the hands of a sociopath disguised as a father. She begged the judge to issue the maximum sentence, saying, he doesn't deserve to see the light of day. I pray Cody haunts him for eternity. Legacy. Cody's Law. In January 2024, 2 years after Cody vanished, lawmakers in Virginia introduced a new bill inspired by his case. The proposed legislation aimed to create a new type of alert system, one that could fill the gap when a missing child's case doesn't meet the strict criteria of an Amber Alert. Cody's case didn't qualify. There was no known abductor, no credible description, no immediate evidence of danger, at least. Not in the eyes of the system. The new bill hopes to ensure that no missing child, no matter the circumstances, is left without the power of public awareness and rapid mobilization. Outro for Cody as this chapter closes. One thing remains heartbreakingly unresolved. Cody Josiah Bigsby has still not been found, but his memory endures in murals, in memorials, and now in legislation, and in the voices of those who loved him, searched for him, and refused to forget him. Even when the justice system seems to catch up, the heart is slower to heal. Thank you for joining us on Crime Whisper tonight. We'll continue to follow this story and many others until every child's voice is heard. Until next time, stay safe. And remember Cody, Cody's Law, and the children left behind, despite the devastation that Cody Bigsby's case left behind. His story sparked real, lasting change. For years, the strict requirements of the Amber Alert system left gaping holes in missing child investigations. The rules required a confirmed abduction, detailed descriptions of both the child and potential abductor, and proof of immediate danger. Cody's case, like too many others, didn't meet that bar. There was no vehicle, no suspect, no obvious kidnapping, just a boy, missing, and no system to shout his name. But that changed in May of 2024, when Virginia's governor signed a new law into effect. Named in Cody's honor, the Cody Alert was designed to close the gaps. It allows law enforcement to issue a digital alert anytime a child is missing, abducted or not. These alerts light up phones within a 10-mile radius and can be updated every 10 minutes, gradually widening the area. The bill's lead sponsor, Delegate A.C. Qudosa, helped search for Cody and spoke from the heart. Every time we send out a Cody alert, we remember the little boy we couldn't save. This is for him. This is so it never happens again. And it's already working. As of October 16th, 2024, 3 children in Virginia had been located safely thanks to the Cody Alert system. But Cody has yet to be found. His body is still missing, likely buried somewhere cold and lonely. He has no grave, no headstone. Not even the chain-link memorial that once held his name and face remains. All that's left are his memories and a law that might just save someone else. The next story, Amari Nicholson, that brings us to another little boy Another child lost too soon. His name was Amari Jordan Nicholson, born October 26, 2018. In Nevada, Amari was remembered as a calm, sweet, happy toddler, his big brown eyes and soft curls lighting up every photo. He adored Mickey Mouse, pizza, oranges, and dancing to on YouTube. Those who knew him, like his mother's ex-boyfriend, described him as an easy baby, always smiling, rarely fussy. Just a joyful little boy full of love and life. But life around Amari wasn't always joyful. His parents, Taylor Nicholson and Giorgio Hayes, had a strained relationship. Taylor claimed Giorgio had been violent during her pregnancy. They were separated before Amari was born. Though Giorgio wanted to be part of his son's life, they struggled to agree on custody or visitation. By 2021, Taylor had a new boyfriend, Roseanne was living with him at the Emerald Suites, just east of the Las Vegas Strip. Terrell had a criminal record burglary and robbery and had only recently been released from prison. Taylor's mother, Carrie Howard, was deeply concerned. She believed Terrell was dangerous, possibly using drugs, and even suspected he'd been abusive toward Taylor and Amari. She tried alerting Child Protective Services. In June 2020, Carrie made a report to Clark County's Department of Family Services, citing concerns of neglect and visible bruising on Amari, but the case was closed just days later. There were no drug tests, no follow-up, no charges. By May 2021, Taylor had traveled to Colorado to care for Carrie, who was recovering from surgery after a severe dog bite. Amari was supposed to go with her. Carrie had bought 2 one-way tickets so mother and son could stay the summer, but for reasons unknown, Taylor left Amari in Terrell's care. That decision would haunt the family forever. Amari goes missing on May 5, 2021, while Taylor was still away. Amari vanished. Terrell claimed a woman had knocked on their hotel room door, someone he'd never seen before. She said she was related to Taylor's ex, Giorgio, and was there to pick up Amari. Terrell said he packed the boy a bag and tried to call Taylor, but before he could finish, the woman allegedly insisted she didn't need anything and left with Amari. That's what he told police. An Amber Alert was issued, briefly. But Nevada's criteria are strict too, with no confirmed vehicle and no identified suspect. The alert was canceled. Authorities said it seemed more like a custody dispute than a kidnapping. Taylor flew home from Colorado, devastated and confused. At first, she backed up Terrell's story, saying maybe someone from Giorgio's family had taken Amari. But her version of events kept shifting. Terrell's story shifted, too. Reporters pressed him. Why would you hand over a child to someone you didn't know? He claimed Taylor told him someone was coming, but Taylor denied it. Then later, she said maybe she had mentioned something. Neither one could keep their story straight, and that was just the beginning. Amari Nicholson, false hope and shifting. Stories in the early days, after Amari Nicholson was reported missing, the public began to grow suspicious, not just of Terrell Rhodes, but of Taylor Nicholson as well. Taylor stood firmly behind Terrell. She told reporters that people online were jumping to conclusions. Strangers, she said, who didn't know the full story and were pointing fingers without context. It's inaccurate, she said. It's just a bunch of people reading comments and trying to insert their 2 cents. All that negative, hateful energy should go into finding our baby, not causing more drama. We're already hurting. But as the days went on, Taylor's own words began to contradict each other. She had originally supported Terrell's story that an unknown woman claiming to be a family member of Amari's biological father had come to pick up the boy, but in a later interview, Taylor admitted that she and Terrell had argued just before she left for Colorado to care for her injured mother. She confessed that she had told Terrell someone might be coming to get Amarabat, only out of spite. It was never a serious arrangement. There was no scheduled handoff. It was a manipulative threat intended to frustrate him. That revelation turned the public's attention back on both Taylor and Terrell, and it deepened the scrutiny. Even Taylor acknowledged that their conflicting accounts could easily make it look like they were hiding something. But she continued to insist that Terrell had nothing to do with Amari's disappearance. When Taylor's mother, Carrie Howard, heard about Amari being missing, she was devastated and confused. Taylor hadn't even called her. Carrie found out from her own father, and she couldn't understand why her daughter had left Amari behind in Las Vegas instead of bringing him to Colorado as they had originally planned. Taylor never offered a clear answer. All she had to do was ask, Carrie later said. We would have helped her. By then, the relationship between mother and daughter had fractured. The last time they spoke was May 8, 2021, 3 days after Amari was reported missing. They were no longer speaking, even as the search for Amari continued. Despite growing suspicion, Taylor remained loyal to Terrell. She defended him publicly, telling reporters Terrell loves Amari like his own. He's been the one caring for him, day in and day out. Amari loves him just as much. You can't say anything negative about a man raising another man's child. Terrell, meanwhile, bristled at the scrutiny. He told reporters it was sick that people were accusing him of involvement in Amari's disappearance. During interviews, he avoided eye contact, often staring at his feet or into the distance. But both Taylor and Terrell kept up appearances. They made heartfelt pleas on television, asking for Amari's safe return. Terrell gave an emotional speech, saying, "Wherever you are, bring our son back. He's just a helpless 2-year-old. He's scared. He needs his medicine, and he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know anyone but me and Taylor." He insisted again and again that he had done nothing wrong. He claimed he let the woman take Amari only because Taylor had previously told him someone would be coming. He said the woman introduced herself as Taylor's baby daddy's sister and said she had everything the boy needed. She said I didn't need to pack anything. She already had what he needed. I watched her walk away. Then I called Taylor, and when she said no one was supposed to come, I panicked. I ran outside, searched the area, but saw nothing. The couple tried to organize community search parties through Facebook. They encouraged volunteers to join them in canvassing the area, putting up flyers, and spreading awareness. But beneath the surface, cracks in the story were growing deeper. Their inconsistent timelines, shifting narratives, and defensive behavior only intensified public suspicion. And still there was no sign of Amari Nicholson, the confession, and the fallout. As the search for Amari stretched into its second week, Taylor Nicholson and Terrell Rhodes insisted they were doing everything in their power to find the missing 2-year-old. They urged the public to join search parties and comb the city. They claimed to have a few ideas about where he might be, but admitted that law enforcement was tight-lipped due to the ongoing investigation. Despite their statements, Taylor's side of the story came across as confused and chaotic in the media. Terrell's family, in contrast, appeared composed and cooperative. Amari's paternal aunts Yolanda, Everett, and Darka Perryman were careful in their public remarks. They didn't attack Taylor, they didn't speculate, but they made it clear their family had nothing to do with Amari's disappearance. And despite the strained relationship with Taylor, they were fully willing to help find him. They worked closely with law enforcement, participated in press conferences, and pleaded with the public for information. A $30,000 reward was announced. Flyers were posted across the city, and 6 days into the search, on May 11, 2020, when everything changed. That day, Terrell finally broke down under pressure, confronted with physical evidence: blood on the wall, soiled children's clothing. He cracked, and then he confessed. He told police that Amari had wet himself. In a moment of rage, Terrell struck him multiple times with a closed fist. The toddler stopped breathing. Terrell tried CPR, but it was too late. Up until that moment, Terrell had maintained the story that Amari was kidnapped. Just 3 days earlier, on camera, he'd said, This is not a finger-pointing game. Our son is really missing. But that, like everything else, had been a lie. As soon as the truth came out, Terrell unraveled. He began sobbing, muttering incoherently, and during the interrogation, he suddenly lunged across the table at a seated officer. While another officer tried to calm him down, Terrell grabbed for the officer's firearm, wrestling with the holster. 2 more officers rushed in and managed to subdue him before the situation turned deadly. Terrell was arrested and hit with a cascade of charges: first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, 4 counts of assault on a police officer with a deadly weapon, 4 counts of resisting arrest. With a deadly weapon, he also provided officers with a hand-drawn map, marking the location of Amari's body. But even then, Terrell wasn't completely honest. 4 days after his arrest, authorities struggled to find Amari's remains until May 12, 2021, when the toddler's body was finally discovered, buried in a shallow grave behind a brick wall near Paradise Road and East Wayne Avenue, just around the corner from where the family had been living, though some early reports mistakenly claimed he was found in a dumpster. Amari had been left in a narrow space between the Siegel Suites and a nearby McDonald's, abandoned like trash. The community was devastated. Taylor's mother, Carrie Howard, wasn't surprised by the outcome. She had warned Taylor from the beginning that Terrell was dangerous. She had reported concerns of abuse months earlier. Still, even she admitted, "I didn't think he'd go as far as killing him, but I'm not shocked." For Taylor, the confession shattered what was left of her world. Until that moment, she had stood by Terrell, defending him publicly, backing up his false story. She'd refused to believe the worst, but now she couldn't deny it. Instead of expressing remorse, however, Taylor became defensive. She complained that people were judging her former friends, strangers online, even distant relatives. She felt she couldn't grieve in peace, and that her pain was being scrutinized. She insisted she was a private person, that she kept her feelings bottled up, that she had been advised to stay home, out of the media spotlight for her safety. Terrell was held at the Clark County Detention Center. His trial would be delayed again and again over the next 3 years. The reasons were never made fully public. Then, 3 months before the trial was set to begin, Terrell accepted a plea deal. On July 30th, 2024, Terrell was sentenced to 20 years to life for the murder of Amari Nicholson, plus an additional 1 to 6 years for each of the assault charges. With those added years, Terrell Rhodes will not be eligible for parole until 2041 at the earliest. His attorney claimed that Terrell is mentally tortured by what he did, but Amari's biological father had no sympathy. He told reporters he should have faced the death penalty. He should look death in the face like Amari did. Prosecutors had announced back in June of 2021 that they would not pursue the death penalty in this case. But Terrell wasn't the only one to face legal trouble that year. In June 2021, Taylor was arrested at the MGM Grand Hotel and Casino on charges of solicitation and carrying a concealed weapon. She had unknowingly propositioned an undercover officer. When they walked to a hotel room together, she was arrested on the spot. Her purse contained brass knuckles and condoms. Taylor waived her right to trial and pleaded no contest. She was given time served. The arrest added fuel to an already raging fire. The public questioned her judgment, her priorities, and her decision to leave Amari in Terrell's care in the first place. But perhaps the greatest outrage was directed at the system. Residents of Las Vegas were furious with how Child Protective Services and the Department of Family Services had handled previous complaints about the household. Many were appalled that the investigation into bruises and suspected neglect had been closed so quickly. There was also frustration about the canceled Amber Alert, because Nevada law requires a specific description of both the child and the abductor. Amari's case didn't qualify. Too often, families file reports that yield no results until it's too late. Carrie Howard believed that if the system had taken her concerns seriously, if they had looked more closely at Taylor's home life. If someone had stepped in, Amari might still be alive. The aftermath, justice for Amari, and the push for change after Terrell Rhodes' chilling confession and the discovery of Amari Nicholson's body in May 2021. The Las Vegas community was left heartbroken, but not silent. Many in the public believed that if Clark County's Department of Family Services had handled the July 2020 abuse complaint with greater urgency, Amari might still be alive. People were outraged. There was a growing sense that the system had failed him not just once, but multiple times. And so, the community responded. Residents launched a petition calling for new legislation, known as Amari's Law. It aimed to change how missing children cases and abuse allegations are handled in Nevada. Among the proposed reforms, Amber Alerts should be issued for any missing child under the age of 18, regardless of whether a vehicle or abductor description is available. Alerts should be based on the last known person the child was seen with, even if that person is a family member. CPS investigations should include interviews with relatives, neighbors, and friends, not just the immediate household. Assess the child's safety. If an abuse report is made, there should be multiple visits from caseworkers. Even if initial visits show no evidence of harm, parents must be held accountable for knowingly leaving their child in the care of a violent or unstable partner. The petition also addressed a painful pattern. Time and again, children were harmed or killed by a non-biological romantic caregiver, someone not bound to them by blood, but given unchecked power in their lives. In these cases, the community believed biological parents should bear some legal and ethical responsibility for their choices. There were also plans to create outreach programs in Amari's name, teaming up with nonprofits across the country to support children and families in crisis. But despite the passionate effort, Amari's Law did not gain enough momentum to move forward in the legislature. Still, the public kept Amari's memory alive. On May 13, 2021, just one day after his body was recovered, the community held a candlelight vigil outside the Siegel Suites just steps away from where he was found. Memorial t-shirts were printed. Balloons, stuffed animals, and flowers surrounded a growing shrine. Another vigil and balloon release took place on May 17th. Note: while we at the Misery Machine do not condone balloon releases due to their environmental impact, we respect the grief and intentions of those who participated. A few days later, on May 19th, a mobile tribute was held. People who missed the earlier memorials decorated their cars with messages and photos of Amari, then drove through the neighborhood, playing his favorite music in his honor. 1 year later, on May 13th, 2022, another memorial was held near the corner of Paradise Road and East Twain Avenue. A solemn return to the place where Amari's life had been so cruelly taken. He was not forgotten. A local rap artist named Seth recorded a tribute song titled Young Amari. The song captured the pain and love felt across the city. We'll include a link in our episode description for anyone who wants to hear it. There were no official fundraisers for Amari's funeral expenses. Several pages popped up online claiming to collect money for the family, but they turned out to be scams. Thankfully, they were quickly taken down. Amari was laid to rest in the new Mesquite City Cemetery in Mesquite, Nevada. His headstone features a portrait of his smiling face. On the back is the poem, When I Must Leave You, by Helen Steiner Rice. It reads, "When I must leave you for a while, please do not grieve and shed wild tears, ... but start out bravely with a gallant smile. For my sake and in my name, live on and do all things the same, ... It's a final message of comfort from a little boy who should have had a lifetime ahead of him. Case 3. Melinda Jean Hogland. Melinda Jean Hogland was born on July 4, 2012, in Chester County, Pennsylvania. Little firecracker born on Independence Day. Her family said she believed the fireworks every year were just for her. She was the youngest of 4 sisters: Emily, Abby, Jamie, and Melinda, with a wide age gap between them. By 2024, all three older sisters were adults. Melinda had light brown hair and big blue eyes, often smiling in every photo. She loved animals, especially dogs, and could often be seen cuddling with ones far bigger than she was. She liked cupcakes with blue sprinkles. Blue was her favorite color, and she had a sweet tooth and a silliness that never faded. In one video, shared by her family, Melinda is seen playing the children's game Pie Face. She turns the crank, tense with anticipation. When the whipped cream smacks her in the face, she squeals, startled at first, but quickly bursting into giggles. She licks some of the cream off her nose, laughing with joy. Melinda loved school. She got good grades, made the honor roll, and was always eager to learn. Her elementary school graduation photo shows her wearing a red academic gown with sleeves so long they swallowed her tiny hands. She was a bubbly, bright, cheerful child, one who saw the world through joyful eyes. But her life took a turn. Melinda's father was Rendell Hogland, also the father of her older sisters. Their mother and Rendell divorced when Jamie, the second youngest, was about 5. The sisters described their father as strict. He believed in spanking, but they said he wasn't violent when they were growing up. He did struggle with prescription drug misuse in the past, but those issues seemed to be behind him by the time Melinda was born. Melinda came into the world about 8 years after the divorce. She was raised primarily by her mother, who had custody, though she still saw her father regularly. By all accounts, Melinda's early childhood was stable. Her sisters called her their dad's favorite. Jamie said Melinda had completely charmed him, and that their father would have done anything for her. But everything changed when Melinda's mother fell seriously ill. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a degenerative autoimmune disease. Her case was severe. Eventually, she became profoundly disabled, requiring assisted living and full-time care. She was no longer able to raise Melinda, so Melinda moved in full-time with her father at first. She had support. Jamie even lived with them from 2018 through mid-2020. Melinda stayed on the honor roll, still smiling, still thriving despite the difficult changes. But then, Rendell met someone. Her name was Cindy Warren, and that's when things began to unravel. Case 3. The Tortured Life and Tragic Death of Melinda Jean Hoagland. Part 2. Cindy. Warren's troubled past didn't begin with Melinda Jean Hoagland. It began decades earlier with a little girl named Jessica. In 1997, Cindy's then partner McKinley Warren fathered a daughter named Jessica Batch during what he called a one-night stand. Jessica's mother struggled with crack cocaine addiction, and by 1999, the toddler had been placed in the care of Cindy and McKinley. Within 2 months, Jessica stopped walking. She stopped talking. She lost weight. She cried constantly. By September of 1999, Child Protective Services in Monroe County removed her, citing signs of failure to thrive. But, shockingly, they returned her to Cindy and McKinley just weeks later. Then came December 1st, 2000. McKinley brought Jessica to the ER, claiming she had accidentally hit her head after falling out of the car. The next day she was dead. Her death was ruled a homicide, but no one was charged, not immediately. The district attorney's office later explained they couldn't determine whether McKinley or Cindy had delivered the fatal blow. So, no one went to jail for Jessica's death. Instead, that same month, Cindy and McKinley got married. Despite the shadow of a murdered child hanging over them, CPS remained. Reporters pieced together fragments from public records, but what emerged was deeply disturbing. While it's unclear if the couple lost custody of their sons during the initial investigation, if they did, it wasn't for long. In 2003, all 3 of Cindy and McKinley's sons were placed in foster care, only to be returned to kinship care later that year. Then in 2006, Cindy gave birth again. She claimed McKinley was the father. He denied it, until a DNA test proved her right. The baby, along with his siblings, was eventually returned to Cindy and McKinley. By this time, Cindy had learned the system. She told caseworkers exactly what they wanted to hear, and over time, CPS trusted her again. But inside the home, it was a horror show. In 2007, an anonymous call to CPS described the abuse of Cindy's 3-year-old son. While the older children were at school, the youngest was locked in rooms for days or worse, thrown outside and left alone. When police arrived with a caseworker, the older siblings brought the little boy to the door. He wore only underwear. His body was covered in bruises, burns, and ligature marks, injuries hauntingly similar to those that had killed Jessica years earlier. This time, police had enough evidence. Cindy and McKinley were arrested. Cindy took a plea deal and testified against her husband. McKinley Warren was convicted of murdering Jessica and sentenced to 50 years in prison. He remains behind bars at Sea Phoenix in Pennsylvania. The murder charges against Cindy were dropped, but for the abuse of her son, she pled guilty to child endangerment and was sentenced to 3 to 7 years. She was released sometime between 2010 and 2014. By 2016, she was pregnant again. The child, her son G, would later become part of her new life with a man named Rendell Hoagland. When Cindy met Rendell around 2018, she presented herself as a reformed woman, a doting mother. Her son G appeared healthy, happy, but Cindy's past was always just a few clicks away. Melinda's older sister Emily grew suspicious. One day, she Googled Cindy's name and was horrified by what she found. She confronted her father. "Dad, do you know what this woman has been accused of?" To her shock, he already knew. His response? "We don't talk about that." Even though Emily was an adult and had always had a friendly relationship with her dad, he didn't want to hear it. When she pressed further, Rendell shut her down. "You're my child, not my friend. You can't correct me." Cindy backed him up. Soon after, Emily was cut off from both her father and Melinda's life. Melinda's other sister, Jaime, tried a different approach. She didn't challenge Cindy outright. She hoped that by keeping the peace, she could remain in contact with Melinda. She noticed Cindy's son G seemed cheerful. She believed their father still loved Melinda deeply, so she bit her tongue because, if she spoke up, she feared she'd lose access. Jaime sent gifts for birthdays and holidays. They talked about getting together in person, but somehow, the family always had an excuse. Plans never worked out. Still, Jaime didn't see it as suspicious at the time. Rendell was always camping or traveling, and Cindy didn't like the older daughters anyway. By 2020, Cindy had returned to social media. On June 17th, she posted a birthday fundraiser for No Kid Hungry, perhaps to polish her public image. That year, Rendell was awarded full custody of Melinda. Included in the custody agreement was a critical clause: the child shall not be left in the care of Cindy Warren for more than 1 hour unless agreed upon in writing by both parents. But by 2021, that agreement was being ignored. That September, Rendell posted a glowing message online: "Find someone who is proud to have you, scared to lose you, who respects and loves you unconditionally." Above it, he simply wrote, "Done by November 2021. A text exchange between Rendell and Cindy first referenced an assault on Melinda that left her injured. The next year, the family moved to a secluded home on Reed Road in rural Chester County, 2 hours away from Melinda's sisters and the rest of her support network. Despite the legal order, Cindy and her son G moved in full-time. Melinda's world began to shrink. That spring, she saw her biological mother for the last time. She transferred to North Brandywine Middle School, but that safe haven wouldn't last much longer. Between June and September 2022, Rendell and Cindy escalated their cruelty. They forced Melinda into painful stress positions, arms raised with heavy books, locked knees, squats held for hours. Her food and water were restricted, her body weakened. But online, the family looked perfect. Around Christmas, Rendell posted a holiday ornament for reindeer labeled Rendell, Cindy, Melinda, and G. The inscription read, "Fourth Christmas Together." There was no mention of Rendell's adult daughters, no trace of the 4 children Cindy had once lost custody of. On December 24th, Rendell shared a picture of Melinda and G cutting sugar cookies for Santa. The same month, they filmed a 30-minute video of Melinda forced to hold books above her head while being yelled at and hit. In January 2023, Melinda still went to school on days when she had visible bruises. Cindy and Rendell covered them with makeup, but in February and March, Melinda missed nearly an entire month of classes. Why? A rug burn on her face. It was too severe to hide. School had been her only escape, her only place of safety, and now, even that had been taken from her. Case 3. The Torture and Tragic Death of Melinda Jean Hoagland, Part 3. After her face finally healed, Melinda was allowed to return to school, but not for long. Another violent beating left her with fresh bruises, too large and too dark to be hidden with makeup. Once again, she disappeared from her classroom. In stark contrast to the silent suffering Melinda endured, Rendell was active on social media, sharing the illusion of a happy, loving home. On May 6th, he posted a picture of a vase filled with roses on the kitchen counter. His caption, "Just because flowers." Later that same month, the entire family, including Melinda, accompanied Rendell to a chili cook-off competition a few hours away. Her sister Jaime, upon learning about the event, decided to attend, hoping for a chance to see Melinda in person. But when she arrived, Melinda was nowhere to be found. Concerned, Jaime asked to stop by the family's hotel room that evening. "It was a cold, rainy day," she recalled. "When I entered the room, it was freezing at most 60 degrees. Melinda was curled up under a big fluffy blanket. She didn't get up, but at the time, I didn't see it as a red flag. She was a kid, she was cold, and she didn't need to get up for me." Jaime sat beside her and gently asked how things were going. Melinda responded with a smile and told her about school, her favorite movies, and how excited she was to be moving up a grade. Looking back now, Jaime sees that night differently. "I think they planned it," she said. "They made sure we were never alone." Eventually, Rendell and Cindy returned to the room and told Jaime it was time for bed. She left, unaware that this would be the last time she ever saw her sister alive. By this point, authorities believe Melinda had been psychologically broken. She had been conditioned to accept the abuse as her reality. She didn't speak up because she knew it would only make things worse. On July 3rd, 2023, Rendell posted a birthday message from Melinda online. There were 2 photos. One was of a bright-eyed toddler, sitting on a small bed and smiling at the camera. The second, far more recent, showed a pale girl in a school t-shirt with a tight-lipped smile. Her hair had been chopped unevenly, and her eyes looked distant. "Happy 12th birthday, Melinda," he wrote. "Hope you have many, many more. We love you." But he wasn't doing anything to help her live to see even one more. That same month, Rendell and Cindy installed Blink security cameras throughout their home, turning their house into a prison with constant surveillance. Every move Melinda made could be watched, judged, and punished. In August, Rendell and Cindy went on vacation to Seaside Heights, New Jersey. He posted smiling selfies of himself and Cindy, captioned, "Enjoying our time together with the kids." Yet no photos of the kids were included. Not a single image of Melinda or G. By October, they were back at the beach again. This time Rendell didn't even pretend to mention the children. His post read, "Last-minute outing, living our best life." Behind the scenes, Melinda was missing more school. By then, she had been absent for 35 days, 25 of them unexcused, far beyond the allowable limit. The school made 2 separate reports to Child Protective Services through the Childline system. What exactly was in those reports remains unknown, but we do know this. CPS never visited the home. After a phone call with Rendell and, possibly Cindy and Melinda, the case was closed in November 2023. Rendell pulled Melinda from in-person classes and enrolled her in virtual school. Only Melinda. G continued going to his school as normal, with Melinda now completely isolated. The abuse intensified by December. Video footage captured unspeakable cruelty. Melinda was now being shackled to furniture, 2 beds, to an air hockey table. She was forced to exercise for hours, doing push-ups, squats, walking in place, even standing still with books held above her head. The punishments became increasingly arbitrary and sadistic. She was punished for not smiling in Zoom classes, dropping a book, moving her hair out of her face, asking for food, forgetting a chore, failing to perform an exercise to their standard. In one clip, Cindy can be heard screaming at her while she held books overhead. When Melinda dropped them, she begged for forgiveness. Cindy's response: she beat her with a spatula and told her that Rendell would beat her even worse when he got home. They starved her. In one video, Cindy tells her coldly, "Keep moving, and don't look for breakfast or lunch tomorrow because you're not getting it. You won't get dinner either because I'm not getting up." They had total control over Melinda, and they used it in the most vile and calculated ways imaginable. Despite the horror, Rendell and Cindy still curated the illusion of a happy family online. At Christmas, Rendell revealed a new family ornament: 3 chubby penguins sitting on a sled. One for Rendell, one for Cindy, one for G. Melinda's penguins stood alone, at the back. Was it intentional? We may never know, but in hindsight, it felt like a cruel metaphor. He posted Christmas Day photos nearly 2 weeks later. On January 6th, G had received a mountain of gifts: a BB gun, a remote-controlled stunt vehicle, an Xbox gift card, a new tablet, a brand new phone. Melinda got clothes. She smiled for each gift, holding them up for the camera. She wore a bulky black hoodie layered over other clothes, hiding just how thin she had become. Both children received new bicycles with big red bows. They smiled beside them, but Melinda had been shackled regularly by this point. It's hard to imagine she ever got the chance to ride hers. Still, we hope somewhere deep inside, she dreamed of pedaling away, of escaping. Melinda was allowed to attend online school, but during lessons, she was chained to her desk and monitored by the Blink cameras. Her mic and camera stayed off. The punishments continued into February 2024. On February 6th, a video showed her shackled to a dresser, marching in place at 3 o'clock p.m. An hour later, the footage shows she had been moved to the basement and chained to an air hockey table, her arms raised above her head in a prolonged stress position between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. 10 additional video clips show her in the same position. 5 hours of physical torment. The next morning, February 7th, she was still on the basement floor, chained. She had no way to call for help. At one point, needing the bathroom, she was forced to go where she lay, and she was punished for it. At 7:30 a.m., she's seen asleep on the floor. By 7:35, she's awake, sitting up and already holding her arms overhead. Later that day, after school, she's once again shackled and made to march in place. At 5:53 p.m., Cindy, speaking through the Blink camera, mocked her. Melinda looks a little tied up at the moment. Because of her, she's got pains in her cuticle and won't move. Melinda's voice trembled. "Please, ... I'm sorry. I know I can't move. I'm sorry." Case 3. The Torture and Death of Melinda Jean Hoagland, Part 4. The Final Days. February 8th, 2024, a Thursday. At 11:40 a.m., a video camera captured Melinda, shackled to her bedroom dresser, doing squats. There was no explanation for why she wasn't attending her usual Zoom class. Hours later, at 3:46 p.m., another video showed her still squatting, this time chained to the air hockey table in the basement. Cindy gave her a 10-minute break. Melinda's voice, soft and tired, responded, "Okay, thank you." Just a few days later, Sunday, February 11th, yet another recording. Melinda was once again cuffed to the air hockey table. She was on her hands and knees, trying to rest. Cindy's voice crackled through the camera. Get up. Do it again, or I'll come in there and kick your teeth in. That night, Melinda slept on the basement floor, cold and alone. No blanket, no pillow, no comfort. The next day, she was chained to the dresser again, this time holding books above her head. Cindy barked corrections at her. Sit up straight. Don't tilt your head. Hold the books higher. While this torture continued, Rendell was online posting chili recipes, pictures of smoked meats, and bragging about his next cook-off competition. Inside that house on Reed Road, Melinda was wasting away in March, in what would become one of the most heartbreaking details of this entire case. Melinda was named Student of the Month at her online school. She had also been placed in honors classes. Yet while she fought to succeed academically, Rendell was out enjoying life, taking Cindy's son G to a Pinewood Derby race and the premiere of the new Ghostbusters movie. Melinda stayed home. In April, footage from the Blink cameras showed a new form of punishment. Cindy and Rendell rubbing soap in Melinda's eyes. It burned. She couldn't see. They didn't care. They didn't even pretend to provide medical help. May 1st, 2024. This would be the last day Melinda was seen awake and conscious by her teachers on Zoom. Over the next few days, her body began to shut down. May 4th, around 12:52 a.m., Melinda lost consciousness. Cindy and Rendell argued about what to do. They weren't sure if she was faking. They didn't call a doctor. They didn't call 911. Instead, Rendell loaded her limp body into his Ford F-150 and began driving back and forth between their home and the campground he often visited. Melinda was unconscious, dying still. They didn't call for help. At 4 p.m., 16 hours after she first passed out, they finally began Googling how to wake someone up. They searched for smelling salts but couldn't find any in local stores. According to Rendell's daughters, Cindy told him to take Melinda to the ER, but he insisted on calling 911 first. It wasn't until 7:27 p.m., minus 18 hours, later that he finally did. First responders rushed to the scene. When paramedics and Chester County Detective Ben Martin arrived, Rendell told them a story that Melinda had been riding her bike in the middle of the night and crashed into a tree. Cindy added that she had a lump on her forehead, a bruise on her chin, and a cut on her nose. It didn't add up. Melinda was covered in bruises, severely underweight, and ice cold to the touch. One of the paramedics took off his own sweatshirt and wrapped it around her. They brought her to the trauma unit at Poi Hospital, but they could tell this wasn't just an accident. Doctors found multiple broken bones deep, tissue bruising, severe malnourishment, organ failure. They rushed her into surgery, doing everything they could, but the damage was too great. Melinda Jean Hoagland was pronounced dead at 9:58 p.m. As police began their investigation, they seized Melinda's Android phone, then Rendell's iPhone, and later Cindy's device too. They obtained warrants to search the family truck and reviewed data from the Blink security cameras inside the home. Inside the truck, investigators found a handcuffed Kia. Pair of blood-stained Crocs. When detectives finally accessed the security footage, they uncovered a horror show. 450 videos of evidentiary value, 150 clips of Melinda chained to furniture, 200 plus clips of her being forced to exercise or punished, hundreds of texts between Cindy and Rendell discussing how to hide Melinda's condition. The evidence revealed a brutal pattern: sleep deprivation, starvation, psychological torment, and physical torture stretching over 2.5 years. On May 6th, Rendell Hoagland and Cindy Warren were arrested. They were initially held at Chester County Prison on $1 million bail each, but once the evidence was reviewed, their charges were upgraded. Bail was denied at a July 25th press conference. Chester County District Attorney Christopher D. Baranasarobe made it official. "We intend to pursue the death penalty in this case. The charges, nearly 280 counts, including first, second, and third-degree murder, kidnapping, aggravated assault, endangering the welfare of a child, false imprisonment, involuntary servitude, conspiracy. Both Rendell and Cindy pled not guilty. The autopsy findings were devastating. The forensic pathologist reported Melinda weighed just 50 pounds, 27 pounds less than she did at age 10. She had no body fat left. She suffered from starvation, not disease. There were over 75 wounds, bruises, ulcers, pressure sores, 6 broken bones, and damage to almost every major organ, including her brain, because of death, starvation, and multiple blunt force injuries. Manner of death, homicide, as the DA said that day. Information from the coroner and medical experts shows a years-long pattern of torture and abuse. This case is still unfolding. A trial date has not yet been set. But one thing is clear. Melinda didn't die suddenly. She was failed systematically by the people who should have loved her, protected her, and saved her. Instead, she was tortured to death. Case 3. The Torture and Death of Melinda Hogland. Part 5. Justice and Aftermath. Narrator. The investigation into the death of 12-year-old Melinda Hogland uncovered a chilling trove of evidence, hundreds of videos and text messages that laid bare the truth. This was not neglect. This was deliberate, calculated, systematic. Prosecutors described a methodical campaign of terror, manipulation, and dehumanization at the hands of Melinda's father, Rendell Hogland, and his partner, Cindy Warren. At a press conference on July 25, 2024, Chester County District Attorney Christopher D. Baranasarobe announced that his office would be pursuing the death penalty. We are going to seek justice for Melinda. As of the time of this recording, their most recent hearing occurred in September 2024. The legal process is expected to take at least 2 years, and Melinda's advocates, including her surviving siblings, are prepared for a long road ahead. Although prosecutors in Pennsylvania are permitted to seek the death penalty, no executions have taken place in the state since 1999. In 2015, a moratorium was placed on capital punishment by the governor. But that doesn't stop prosecutors from pursuing it in cases of extraordinary brutality. The last time the state pursued it was in 2014, in the infamous case of Scotty McMillan, a 3-year-old who, like Melinda, was tortured and beaten to death by the adults who were supposed to protect him. That case, also from West Calne Township, ended in plea deals. The man was sentenced to life, and the mother 242 to 94 years. When news broke about another child dying under similar circumstances, Scotty's family was devastated. At the July press conference, the DA didn't just focus on punishment, he delivered a plea to the community and to the nation. When you read the affidavit, when you understand what was done to Melinda, you ask, what more could we have done? Could we have saved her? This is a critical moment. It's time for law enforcement, schools, and child services across the state and the country to examine our processes, to make sure children like Melinda don't fall through the cracks. Because the reality is, this does happen, and it doesn't always make national headlines. He paused, then added, but make no mistake, we are here because evil exists. We don't like to think about that, but sometimes, no matter what's done, no matter how hard we try, evil still reaches the most innocent among us. And that's what happened here. He urged the public to remain vigilant. You don't need to be a teacher or a doctor to speak up. If you see something, say something. One phone call, one data point can change everything, can save a life. While the community processed its grief, Melinda's family quietly laid her to rest. Her funeral was private. But on June 23, 2024, her sisters organized a public celebration of life at Upper Mount Bethel Community Park. They wanted joy. They wanted color. They wanted Melinda to be remembered the way she deserved. There were clowns, carnival games, a petting zoo, and a pavilion full of her photos. In the afternoon, guests released butterflies, and by evening, they lit sparklers in her memory. Melinda's sister Emily explained, "We just wanted a space where people could come together to celebrate the amazing little girl that she was, a place she would have loved." In a moment that stunned everyone, the paramedic who cared for Melinda the night she died attended the event. He brought with him a small, powerful tribute, a piece of the sweatshirt he had wrapped around her at the hospital, embroidered with her initials. He handed the pieces to her family, a promise to keep her memory alive and to spread the same kindness and warmth he had shown her in her final hours. As the investigation unfolded, Cindy's son, G, was placed in protective custody. He is now under the care of family or foster guardians. The tragedy made national headlines. Students at Melinda's former school where she had once thrived organized a rally in her honor. CBS Philadelphia interviewed classmates and families who knew her. One student, Michaela, wasn't a close friend of Melinda's, but the story shook her. No child should go through that. We couldn't stop talking about how devastating it was. Michaela and her friends started a simple movement. They wore blue t-shirts, Melinda's favorite color, and asked others to do the same. Word spread fast. Dozens of kids showed up wearing blue, with signed shirts and heartfelt messages. Heather and Christy's sisters from the same township were amazed by the support. "It's beautiful to see a community come together for a child," Heather said. "Children matter. That's what this shows." While the DA defended the efforts of the schools and teachers who worked with Melinda, attorney Tom Bosworth, representing Melinda's sisters, disagreed. He claimed the system should have done more. They knew this child was in a home with someone who had a history. There were sins, psychological, physical. CPS didn't even conduct a home visit. Bosworth has filed suit against Chester County, Monroe County, and the Upper Dublin and Coatesville school districts. He argued that had a home check been conducted rather than just phone calls, Melinda's life might have been spared. "We have home visits for a reason. This shouldn't have happened, and it will happen again as the system changes." Melinda's death didn't just shatter her siblings. It shattered what was left of her family. Emily, one of Rendell's adult daughters, said, "We lost our baby sister, but we also lost our father. We're still trying to process how anyone could do this." Even Rendell's parents are reeling. His mother, Joyce, posted on social media, "We loved her. Why did they take her from us? Our hearts are broken. How did our son become a monster?" She added, "He used to be so kind, such a good father. I don't know this man anymore." Narrator. The death of Melinda Jean Hoagland is one of the most harrowing child abuse cases in recent memory. But this is not just a story about cruelty, it's a warning, a reminder that even in our neighborhoods, evil can hide in plain sight, and that the systems we trust to protect the most vulnerable among us still have devastating gaps. As the legal process unfolds, we'll continue to follow the case. But for now, all we can do is remember Melinda, not for how she died, but for who she was. Episode: The Crime Whisper, Segment 3. Justice for Melinda and the Tragedy of Sarah Sharif. Narrator. In the days after Melinda Hoagland's death, her family was left shattered, grappling with the weight of grief, betrayal, and unimaginable loss. Her grandmother, Joyce, posted, "I feel like I'm having a nightmare. I want to wake up. I want Melinda back. My heart is hurting so badly." Her grandfather, Ralph, was equally devastated, writing, "I'm hurting like I've never hurt before, knowing my own son did this to his daughter. I want justice for Melinda. She was such a lovable girl. I will always love her and miss her." As the legal system prepares to determine Rendell Hoagland's fate, the family must now confront the possibility that he could be sentenced to death. When asked how they were coping, Melinda's sister, Jaime, said, "If the death penalty is what the system decides, then that's what happens. But our justice doesn't stop there. We're trying to make sure this doesn't happen to other kids. Because Melinda is not the only one. Jaime, Emily, Abby, and their loved ones have vowed to turn their grief into purpose. They've launched a GoFundMe campaign to fund a non-profit, Justice for Melinda. Their goal, to create a child abuse registry, Melinda's law that would require anyone convicted of child abuse to be listed in a public database. Much like Megan's law does for sex offenders. Had such a registry existed, Cindy Warren, who was allegedly living with Melinda, in violation of a custody agreement, may have been flagged sooner. They're also throwing their support behind Pennsylvania House Bill 2175, a measure that would create a permanent state-level child advocate tasked with fighting child abuse. The bill passed the House in July. As of this recording, it remains stalled in the Senate. On their GoFundMe page, Melinda's sisters wrote, "Melinda will not be remembered as a statistic. She will be the spark behind a monsoon of change. We, Emily Lee, Abby, and Jaime Hoagland, are ready to stand in the face of evil. For Melinda. For every child. If you'd like to help, a link to the fundraiser is in the episode description." Case 4. The tragic death of Sarah Sharif, Woking, United Kingdom. Now, from Chester County, Pennsylvania, we take you across the Atlantic to Woking, in Surrey, England, a quiet town rocked by the murder of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif. Sarah was born on January 11, 2013. Two parents, Irfan Sharif and Olga Sharif, of Pakistani and Polish descent. After the couple's divorce, custody was granted to her father, who was living in a council home in Horsell with his new wife, Binish Batul, and his brother, Faisal Malik. On the morning of August 10, 2023, UK Emergency Services received a chilling call. It was Irfan Sharif, Sarah's father. He told them plainly, "I killed my daughter. She was being naughty. I didn't mean to. I just beat her too much." By the time authorities arrived at the home, the entire household had fled to Pakistan. Left behind was Sarah, her lifeless body tucked beneath a blanket in her bunk bed. A handwritten note from Irfan simply said, "Love you, Sarah." But the autopsy told a far more horrifying story. Sarah's body was found to have sustained over 70 separate injuries. These included human bite marks, scalds on her feet, burn from a hot iron, a fractured hyoid, bone puncture wound to her skull, 11 spinal fractures, and a traumatic brain injury. She had bruises on her fingers, ribs, and shoulder blades. Many of her injuries showed signs of prolonged restraint, suggesting torture over time. Investigators believe that in her final hours, Sarah was tied up, hooded, and beaten with a metal pole and a cricket bat. There were so many injuries that pathologists couldn't even determine which one caused her death. In his original statement, Irfan admitted to beating Sarah multiple times but later recanted, claiming it happened only once. Justice John Kavanaugh saw through the excuse. This was not a moment of rage. This was deliberate. You tied her up. You covered her head so you wouldn't have to see her face. Then you beat her again and again with a weapon. The horror didn't stop with Irfan. Sarah's body bore 6 adult bite marks, 5 on her arm, 1 on her inner thigh. To find the culprit, investigators collected dental impressions from the adults in the home. Irfan and his brother were ruled out. Binish Batul refused to submit a sample. The judge inferred what the evidence already suggested. She was the one who bit Sarah, though the bite marks were not fatal. The judge said, "They showed just how involved you were in Sarah's abuse. You were not a passive observer. You were complicit and comfortable with what was being done to her." After a month on the run, Pakistani police raided a home in Jhelum, Punjab, where they found Irfan's 5 surviving children. Thankfully, they were unharmed and were placed in protective custody. The next day, on September 13th, all 3 adults returned to the UK via Dubai and were arrested at London's Gatwick Airport. They were charged with murder and causing or allowing the death of a child. Narrator, in cases like Melinda's, like Sarah's, justice isn't just about the courtroom, It's about accountability, prevention. It's about remembering these girls, not for how they died, but for who they were: smart, funny, kind, loved until their last breath by the siblings and extended family who are still here, still fighting for them. If we've learned anything from these cases, it's this: evil hides in plain sight, and we owe it to the next child to keep our eyes open. This has been the Crime Whisper. We'll return next week with a new case. Until then, stay aware, stay compassionate, and never stay silent. Segment 5. The Aftermath of Justice. Sarah Sharif's killers behind bars narrator. Shortly after their convictions, a police video of Banish Baitsul's interrogation began circulating online, generating widespread outrage. Take a listen. Detective, can you introduce yourself? Batul. My name is Banish Batul. Detective, you're about to be interviewed on suspicion of murder. What do you understand that offense to mean? Batul, killing someone. Detective, right. Intentionally killing someone. That's the offense you've been arrested for. Now, what happened to Sarah? Batul? No comment. Detective, did you love Sarah? Batul, no comment. Detective, did you care about her at all? Batul, no comment. Her refusal to express even a basic acknowledgement of care for Sarah, her own stepdaughter, left many viewers stunned. Yes, no comment is a legally advised phrase akin to invoking the Fifth Amendment. But one has to wonder, how hard is it to simply say you loved the child you helped raise? December 11th, 2024. The verdict after a 10-week trial. Irfan Sharif and Banish Batul were found guilty of murder. Faisal Malik, Sarah's uncle, was acquitted of murder, but convicted of causing or allowing the death of a child. In a press conference following the verdict, Detective Chief Inspector Craig Emerson of Surrey Police addressed the public. Sarah was a bright, resilient little girl who loved singing and dancing. Her life was cut short by unspeakable abuse and brutality. These defendants, her father, stepmother, and uncle, either inflicted or allowed that abuse to continue. They have shown no remorse. Today, justice has finally been served. December 17th, 2024. Sentencing Justice John Kavanagh handed down the following sentences. Irfan Sharif, minimum of 40 years in prison. Banish Batul, 33 years. Faisal Malik, 16 years. The toll on a mother. In a heartbreaking interview with The Guardian, Sarah's mother, Olga, described the pain of identifying her daughter's body. They dressed her in pajamas and covered her with a blanket. But her face, her cheeks, were swollen, her body bruised. If someone hadn't told me it was Sarah, I wouldn't have believed it. She was so changed, so traumatized. That wasn't my daughter. Segment 6. Prison Justice. The New Year's Day attack. Just weeks after sentencing, Irfan Sharif was targeted in prison on January 1st, 2025, at Belmarsh Prison, one of the UK's most secure category. A facility's sheriff was attacked in his cell by 2 inmates. His assailants used a jagged lid from a tin of tuna to slash his face and neck. He survived, but required medical treatment in the prison's healthcare unit. Sources told The Sun. Sharif is terrified of returning to the wing. He fears more attacks. Right now, he's in no rush to go back. While some questioned how a sharp tin lid could exist inside a maximum security facility, we did some digging. According to gov.uk, inmates can possess tin goods, but only if kept in designated storage areas regulated by prison authorities. Belmarsh, despite its reputation as Britain's Guantanamo, allows certain canned goods under strict policy. And for those wondering, yes, UK prisons often allow tin items, just as many US state facilities do. In the US, commissary rules typically allow canned food, provided it is sealed under 16 ounce. Sealed under 16 ounce doesn't require additional preparation in both nations. The policy hinges on security and administrative discretion. Narrator. As for Sharif's attackers, they remain unnamed. But the message was clear, even behind bars. The brutal murder of a child like Sarah draws fury from the public and from fellow inmates alike. But this raises bigger questions. Should vengeance play a role in justice? Do prison assaults serve as moral comeuppance or failures of safety? We'll leave that to you, the listener, to consider. Narrator: for Sarah's family, the pain will never fade, but her name, like Melinda's now, stands as a call to action. A reminder that evil often festers behind closed doors, and that silence is complicity. From Chester County to Woking, one thing remains true. When we see something, we must say something, because if we don't, who will? This concludes our case coverage for today on The Crime Whisper. Join us next week, where we'll uncover another story of tragedy, justice, and the battle to protect the innocent. Until then, stay vigilant, stay human, and whisper for the voiceless. Segment updates in the Sarah Sharif case: justice, accountability, and the questions left behind. Narrator: as the world continues to process the tragedy of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif, the story has taken even more unexpected and, at times, disturbing turns. Let's begin with where Irfan Sharif now resides: Belmarsh Prison, or as many inmates call it, Hellmarsh. This isn't just any prison. Belmarsh has a reputation for housing some of the most dangerous offenders in the UK, including infamous criminals like grinder killer Stephen Port, whose story we covered several years ago. We'll link that episode for those interested. But before we elevate Irfan's attacker to the level of hero, let's take a closer look at who he is. The attacker, a violent past sheriff, was slashed across the face and neck on New Year's Day 2025 by 45-year-old Stephen Sansom, a convicted murderer with a brutal history of his own. Sansom, alongside 49-year-old Gemma Watswas, found guilty of the murder and dismemberment of 38-year-old Sarah Mayhew. After killing her, the pair used power tools to mutilate her body and scattered her remains across southwest London. Some were found in the River Wandle, others in a public park discovered by a dog walker, though the exact cause of death remains unclear. The autopsy revealed skull bruising to fractured vertebrae near the voice box, shaved head, and, as if that weren't horrific enough, it wasn't Stephen Sansom's first offense. On Christmas Eve in 1998, he stabbed taxi driver Terrence Bowl in the throat. Mr. Bowl, a father of two, managed to stagger to a nearby house, but died at the doorstep. Sansom served just over 20 years and was released in December 2019, only to commit yet another murder not long after. So, yes, Sansom might have done what many felt like doing to Sharif, but let's be clear, this man is no hero. He is another violent offender, capable of horrific acts. Legal developments. Sentencing appeals on January 20th. The BBC reported that the Solicitor General of the UK had officially filed an appeal against Irfan Sharif's sentence, calling it too lenient. If you're unfamiliar with the role, the Solicitor General oversees appeals to ensure consistency and fairness in sentencing. The current Solicitor General, Lucy Rigby, referred the case to the court to reconsider Sharif's 40-year minimum sentence, a move many welcomed. Just to clarify, this appeal is not being filed by Sharif to reduce his time, it's actually the government seeking a longer, harsher sentence. Meanwhile, Sharif himself is also appealing, attempting to challenge his conviction and sentence. The hearing date for either appeal has yet to be scheduled. More revelations. Who gave him custody? On January 24th, another stunning development made headlines. A court ruling allowed the public release of the names of the family court judges who had granted full custody of Sarah to her father in 2019, despite his troubling past. Until then, these judges had been shielded from public identifications, citing fears of a virtual lynch mob. But media outlets like the BBC pushed back in the name of public accountability, and they won. As of January 31st, the judges involved were named: Alison Racy DePiter, Nathan Sully Williams, Peter Nathan, and Sally Williams have since retired, but Judge Rayside remains active on the bench. What makes this revelation so unsettling is that the court had full knowledge of Sharif's criminal history. He had 5 prior arrests, and several former romantic partners had accused him of false imprisonment and abuse. Yet the court allowed him not only unsupervised visitation, but full custody of Sarah and her siblings. According to Sir Geoffrey Voss, the master of the rolls in England and Wales, the attempt to protect these judges' identities was legally invalid. He said, in the circumstances of this case, the judge had no jurisdiction to anonymize the historic judges, either on December 9th or thereafter. He was wrong to do so. This case is not fading quietly. It's sparking questions that reach far beyond the Sharif family about the limits of child protection, the failures of social systems, and how often these tragedies could have been prevented. Final thoughts here in the US. It's rare that a UK case receives so much sustained attention, but Sarah's story struck a chord, even with people who don't normally follow true crime. And as more updates continue to emerge, appeals, judicial accountability, and new legal efforts to protect children, one thing remains clear: this isn't over. We'll keep following this story, and we'll post updates as they become available. If you want us to keep doing episodes like this covering developing cases and legal updates, let us know in the comments or by email. Up next, Case 5, Timothy McLean. Begin segue to next case coverage. Segment, the Greyhound bus beheading, the murder of Tim McLean. Narrator Timothy Richard McLean Jr. was born on October 3, 1985, in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. He grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, surrounded by 6 siblings and a large, loving extended family. At the time of his death, Tim had a baby on the way with his former girlfriend, Colleen Yastrub, whom he'd known since grade school. He was a vibrant, energetic 22-year-old. Friends described Tim as charismatic, adventurous, and full of life. He was passionate about motorbikes, football, and travel often, letting fate decide where he'd land next. His nomadic spirit led him to work with the North American Midway Entertainment as a carnival worker, traveling across Western Canada and making new friends wherever he went. That free-spirited life came to a horrific and unimaginable end on July 30, 2008. During a Greyhound bus ride along the quiet stretch of the Trans-Canada Highway, Vince Lee, a fragmented mind, the man responsible for Tim's death, was Vincent Wei Guang Li, born April 30, 1968, in Beijing, China. He immigrated to Canada in 2001 with his wife Anna and settled in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Lee held various jobs: custodian, forklift operator, newspaper delivery man, and was eventually granted Canadian citizenship in 2005. However, there were signs that something was deeply wrong, though never officially diagnosed with a mental illness prior to the murder. Lee had begun hearing voices as early as 2004. He claimed these voices were from God, telling him he was the second coming of Christ, and that his mission was to save the world from an alien invasion. At one point, he reportedly spent 4 days under psychiatric observation, but was released without a diagnosis. His wife would later say he had a habit of taking random bus rides with no destination. His life spiraled. He separated from his wife, moved to Edmonton, and drifted between jobs. According to some co-workers, he experienced outbursts that may have led to repeated firings. In the final days of July 2008, Lee bought a knife at Canadian Tire later, claiming it was to protect himself from aliens. He sold his laptop to a teenager for just $60 and spent the night before the murder sleeping on a bench behind a grocery store in rural Manitoba. The bus ride, Greyhound, number 1170, on July 30th, 2008. Tim and Lee were 2 of 37 passengers aboard Greyhound bus number 1170, heading from Edmonton to Winnipeg. The bus traveled along the Yellowhead Highway through Saskatchewan. Tim, exhausted from weeks on the road, boarded with plans to finally reunite with family and friends. Initially, Lee sat near the front of the bus, but after a rest stop, he deliberately moved to the back, choosing the empty seat beside Tim, who was quietly listening to music with his headphones in and never engaged in conversation. Around 9 p.m., with the movie Zorro playing on the overhead screen, horror struck. Without warning, Vince Lee stood up, pulled out the large hunting knife he had purchased earlier, and began stabbing Tim in the throat and chest repeatedly and violently. Tim awoke screaming, but had no time to defend himself. Vince overpowered him, pinning him against the bathroom door and delivering 50 to 60 stab wounds. Witnesses later said Tim's screams were haunting, something they would never forget. Panic and terror on the highway, the bus driver immediately pulled over, and passengers scrambled to escape, many trampling each other in their panic. With no towns or shelters nearby, they were left stranded on the side of the road, terrified that Lee might chase them. One of the passengers sitting directly in front of Tim initially thought it was just a scuffle, but when he turned and saw the blood and the knife, he realized it was something far worse. Though he wanted to intervene, he was alone, and the attacker was armed, a trucker named Chris Alguer, who had stopped upon seeing the chaos, joined the bus driver and this witness to try to help. But when they approached the door, they saw Vince Lee cutting off Tim's head. Lee then charged at the three men, still holding the knife. The bus driver quickly closed the door, managing to trap Lee inside. His arm, however, was still sticking out, knife in hand, and he swiped at the bystanders. Then came a moment no one could prepare for. Vince Lee walked to the front of the bus, calmly holding Tim's severed head, and displayed it through the window, almost like a trophy. He then dropped it to the floor without emotion, as passengers cried, vomited, and collapsed in horror. What happened after, when officers arrived minutes later, Tim was already dead and decapitated, but Vince Lee wasn't done. Inside the locked bus, he proceeded to mutilate Tim's body, cutting off pieces and eating them, in a chilling radio transmission. One officer described him as a badger at the front of the bus, defiling the body and eating it as we speak. He consumed part of Tim's heart and both eyes, and stored body parts in plastic bags, scattering them throughout the bus. Several attempts were made to get Lee to surrender, but he refused, telling officers he had to stay on the bus forever. Eventually, Vince Lee attempted to escape by breaking through a bus window. He was quickly subdued, arrested, and placed in handcuffs, repeatedly apologizing as he was taken into custody. Aftermath and public outrage. The sheer brutality of this murder shocked Canada and the world. Many demanded answers and justice. The public outcry was intense, especially when it was revealed that Lee would later be found not criminally responsible due to mental illness. That story and what happened after deserves its own segment, which we'll cover in the next episode. But what remains clear is this: Tim McLean, a joyful young man with his whole life ahead of him, was stolen from his family in the most senseless and unimaginable way. He didn't deserve what happened, and neither does any family. Continued segment: The Greyhound Bus, Beheading, Aftermath, and Legacy. Narrator: When officers finally subdued Vince Lee on that desolate stretch of the Trans-Canada Highway, they found Tim McLean's remains, horrifically mutilated, a scene that defied belief. Lee had blood smeared across his face. He was incoherent, begging officers to end his life. Inside his pockets, police found Tim's tongue, nose, and an ear, leading many to believe that Lee was keeping them as gruesome trophies. Following his arrest, Vince Lee was transported to the Winnipeg Remand Center, a facility where inmates are held while awaiting trial. Meanwhile, Tim's dismembered body remained on the bus for hours before being taken to the chief medical examiner's office for autopsy. To this day, that autopsy report has never been released publicly. Witnesses in trauma, the passengers who witnessed this horror, were taken to the Royal Oak Inn in Brandon, Manitoba, for the night. For many, that night would mark the start of a lifetime battle with PTSD. Truck driver Chris Alguer, who had tried to help, later struggled with alcoholism and uncontrollable rage. Another woman, who remained anonymous, lost custody of her infant for 18 months because social services feared her trauma made her unfit to parent. This was not just a murder, it was a tragedy that shattered the lives of dozens, not just one. A candlelight vigil and family grief a week after the killing. Mourners gathered on the steps of the Manitoba legislature to hold a candlelight vigil for Tim, his older sister, Amanda Corrigan, and younger brother, Kendall Dill, spoke about Tim's gentle nature. He wasn't just a carnival worker or a headline, he was a vibrant soul who had never been in a fight and wouldn't hurt a fly. They asked the public to remember Tim for how he lived, not how he died. But that was easier said than done. The case, now recognized as one of the most shocking crimes in Canadian history, sparked national outrage. The fate of Tim's killer, Vince Lee, would only add fuel to the fire. The trial of Vince Lee was initially charged with second-degree murder, but after undergoing psychiatric evaluation, he was found to be suffering from untreated schizophrenia. He claimed that voices in his head, messages from God, told him that Tim was an alien who needed to be destroyed. On March 5, 2009, Judge John Scurfield ruled that Lee was not criminally responsible for his actions. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as forensic psychiatrist Dr. Stanley Yaron told the judge he considered Lee a victim to a man gripped by delusions he couldn't escape. Lee was sent, not to prison, but to Selkirk Mental Health Center, a secure psychiatric hospital in Manitoba. There was no fixed sentence. Tim's family attended the trial, wearing shirts printed with his face. They wept as the details of the killing were read aloud, and they were devastated again when Vince Lee spoke only once, begging the court, "Please, kill me." Legal fallout and lawsuits in the wake of the ruling. 2 passengers from Greyhound Bus 1170 filed a lawsuit against Vince Lee, Greyhound, the RCMP, and the Canadian government, seeking $3 million for the trauma they endured. The suit was dismissed in 2015 because, under Manitoba's no-fault insurance laws, Greyhound could not be held liable. Tim's father, Tim McLean Sr., also filed a separate lawsuit on behalf of 13 family members, claiming Greyhound and the federal government had failed to ensure passenger safety. That lawsuit is still unresolved, according to Tim Sr. Greyhound never offered an apology or any form of condolence. Reintegration and public outcry by 2015. After years of therapy and medication, doctors concluded that Vince Lee posed minimal risk to the public. He was granted unsupervised day passes and later allowed to live in a supervised group home in Winnipeg. In 2017, he was granted an absolute discharge, meaning no further monitoring, no probation, no legal restrictions. Lee legally changed his name to Will Baker and remains in Manitoba. Tim's mother, Carol Dedley, told CBC News she was horrified and sickened that her son's killer was walking the streets freely. She expressed grave concern that Lee could stop taking his medication, asking, "We all know what happens when he doesn't take his meds. The fact that it's left up to him, that should terrify everyone." In protest, about 50 people gathered at the Manitoba legislature for a rally titled Justice for Tim McLean. Friends like Jenny Clark and others demanded that Lee be permanently housed in a psychiatric facility under constant supervision. Even Matt Logan, a former RCMP officer and forensic psychologist, warned that an absolute discharge was not in the public interest. He emphasized that Canada needed to better bridge the divide between the mental health system and criminal justice. Public division, not everyone, however, opposed Vince Lee's reintegration. Chris Somerville, CEO of the Schizophrenia Society of Canada and a frequent visitor at Selkirk, supported Lee's release. He stated publicly that Vince was filled with great shame and remorse. In a 45-minute interview released after his discharge, Vince Now Baker spoke for the first time. "I understand why people are afraid because of what I did, but I don't hear voices anymore. If I ever did again, I would call my doctor. Immediately. He also expressed a desire to apologize to Tim's mother. If I could talk to her directly, I would. I'm sorry for what I did. The McLean family, however, has never commented on the interview. They have no intention of meeting with the man who took Tim from them. A family's lifelong fight. Too many Canadians. The fact that Vince Lee could murder, decapitate, and cannibalize a young man and walk free just 7 years later feels like a deep injustice. For the it feels like Vince got away with murder. They began campaigning for Tim's Law, a proposed measure that would ensure individuals found not criminally responsible for violent crimes would be institutionalized permanently, regardless of recovery. But support was sparse. The petition was closed in 2014 with only 1,200 signatures. The Deadly Foundation for Life, created to fund advocacy for legal reform, was also dissolved. What remains is a memorial near the stretch of highway where bus 1170 came to a halt. A white cross reads, "Timothy Richard McLean, we love you." It stands surrounded by wildflowers, with one of Tim's shirts tied around the base. The funeral and final farewell. Tim McLean's funeral took place on August 8, 2008, at Chapel Lawn Memorial Gardens in Winnipeg. Over 600 people attended. His uncle, Alex McLean, delivered a eulogy describing Tim as sweet, kind, and always smiling. The funeral almost became the target of a protest by the Westboro Baptist Church, a fringe hate group based in the U.S. after boasting online about plans to picket the service. Canadian Border Services denied entry to most members. Those who made it to Manitoba were met by a human wall of counter-protesters formed by hundreds of local residents. The church never showed up. Tim was laid to rest without disruption. Legacy, a life that echoes on 5 months after the murder. Colleen Yastrub, Tim's childhood friend and the mother of his unborn son, gave birth. The child's name has never been shared publicly. After a custody dispute, Tim's mother, Carol Dedley, was granted full guardianship. She calls her grandson a gift from Tim, a reason to get up in the morning. She says he has his father's eyes and sense of humor. Tim Sr., now estranged from Carol, hasn't seen his grandson in years, adding another layer to the family's grief. In 2019, Colleen posted a photo of Tim's son visiting his father's grave, captioned, "Tim, our son, and I think of you every day." Closing thoughts today. The loss of Tim McLean still reverberates not only among those who knew him, but among Canadians who read about the case and still ask themselves, how could this have happened? And what does justice really look like in a case like this? Tim's mother, Carol, frequently visits his grave. In one CBC interview, she sat on a bench near the headstone and quietly said, "When this first happened, I was mad. I couldn't understand how the world just kept going. Mine stopped." And perhaps that's the enduring tragedy of this story. For the rest of the world, the traffic kept moving. But for the McLean family, everything stopped, and it may never truly start again.